Welcome to the UFOcast episode 5. This time we're covering Survival in our rewatch order. This is the order that they appear on DVD. I'm Michael.
And I'm Luke.
And let me see, I think we're alright today covering Survival, despite the fact that on some of my listings we had that as episode 6, and in the complete episode guide of Jerry Anderson we've got that down as episode 3, which is great. But no, this is the DVD order and the Blu-ray order, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit. This is Survival. Now,
and this is another story with a date in it.
Is it?
Yes.
I'd not noticed. See, I'm not paying that much attention. Where's the date?
When the dude, whose name I've already forgotten, Bill, wasn't it? When Bill dies, they blast his remains into space, and Foster reads out the date. And it's some point in 1981.
Well, there you go. So, as always, the opening credits are wrong.
Yes. And I've gone back to episode 2, and it's even, it's in the dialogue. Like, he actually says it's 1984. So we're clearly out of order. We know that, but actually within the canon of the show, 1984 in episode 2, 1981 in episode 5, it's all out of order, all bets are off. Doesn't really matter what order you watch the series in, it would seem.
You see, so that's fine. That it works for me, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care, it doesn't matter.
Right. So, what I've done is, I've bought the complete Jerry Anderson episode guide, right?
Right.
And it's got everything, obviously, except Lavender Castle, because it was published before that. I think it's by Boxtree. I got it off eBay. I've been doing research because I keep making mistakes and I want to learn more.
Yes.
See, over the years, me and you have read the Doctor Who books and the sci-fi guides and things like that. And all of this knowledge is kind of soaked in. It's physically in our DNA, so we know this kind of thing about Doctor Who. Somebody mentions something, you go, oh yeah, that story's set in 1977, which really it's not, or something like that. We kind of just know without thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know these things about UFO, because to me, I'm watching this new. This is fresh. This is like, as it's happening. Basically, it's as if this program's just been made now, looks a bit odd, is a bit slow, still loving it, and I'm experiencing it. So that's fine. But I thought, I want to know more. I want to stop making basic mistakes. So I thought, I know, I'll get some books. So I've been hunting around, and there's a 600-page book written by Mr. Pixley, and that came with the Blu-ray that I couldn't afford. So I haven't got that. And there's also the massive complete UFO book, which apparently is now out of print. It did go down to about a tenner on Amazon, and now it's about £400 on Amazon. But there is a pre-order for £30 at the moment, and it says it'll be in stock within 7 weeks. I do not know how that works, but apparently it'll be dispatched when it's in. So if you're after the complete UFO bestest book in the world, apparently, it's £30 at the moment on Amazon UK, but it's £400 if you buy the second-hand one.
I'm slightly sceptical about that, but
not as sceptical as I am. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm ridiculous. Anyway, so what have you learned so far, Michael? I've got that it's a really good series and there are loads of episodes. I'm not reading the spoilers for ones I've not seen. I'm not an idiot. But what I have got is an episode breakdown, a synopsis. Right. So we could use that.
Okay.
To open with, because that makes sense.
Go ahead. Read the synopsis for this episode.
But I've just realised I'm dyslexic. Hey, so bear with me. When a UFO lands somewhere in the moon, a search is ordered for it. But it means disaster for Paul Foster. When the UFO is spotted and shot down, it crashes on his moonmobile and is left for dead. But although his transport is destroyed, Paul is alive, and so is the alien. Using Paul's gun, the alien forces Paul to lead his way to Moonbase until his air supply runs out. Then, incredibly, the alien gives Paul one of his own oxygen canisters to continue the journey, but tragedy lies ahead, ... Except, of course, that covers nothing. Because at the beginning of this episode, we've got the incredible UFO on the moon, and then you've got the assassination attempt with the gunshot, and you've got the decompression scene.
Yes, I have to say that synopsis is remarkably misleading, and it's funny though,
well ropey. Yeah.
because in my memory before rewatching this time, this was the Geordie and the Romulan episode, the enemy mine episode. For those who've seen that film or even read the book, the two people on opposite sides are brought together for some reason, and have to kind of, although they would normally be enemies and one would try and kill the other, they have to kind of club together in adversity and get back to safety or whatever it is. And in watching it, I realised that is about 10-15 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, well, that is the most
it takes
exciting
ages
bit
to get to that point, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You kind of, but again, thinking back on it after I'd watched it, they were the bits that stuck with me. But there's loads of, and I hate to use the word padding. It's not padding. It's characterization. It's plot. It's tension building that pays off in that enemy mine bit. But yeah, it's when you said the Geordie and the Romulan. I'm sorry, being from Newcastle, I just thought that was the beginning of a joke. It was this Geordie and the Romulan. They were in a pub. No, leave it there. Bernard Wright on. So,
do you feel a particular attachment to Geordie in Star Trek because you're a Geordie?
No, absolutely not.
You've already mentioned this, Michael. Let's talk about the beginning of this episode with Foster and Bill. I can't remember his surname. The Bill and Paul are hanging out in the leisure sphere.
The leisure sphere.
The leisure sphere of Moonbase, and an alien comes along and shoots a hole through the window. Not entirely sure why, other than this will disrupt the Moonbase. It made me wonder why he didn't shoot several other windows out. But anyway, we have this.
Or if you can get that close, you could sabotage it. I mean, as we find out in a few episodes' time, it's quite easily to sabotage Moonbase from the outside.
Yes, but anyway, that's aside. We've got this set up, and I mean, I have to say it's a really dramatic scene and really well done. I don't know how scientifically accurate it was.
Yes.
As to whether that is exactly what would happen.
Now, hang on.
Would the balloon do what it did, for example?
Hang on. I know that the pedantic amongst us get very upset when people say you get sucked out into space because you get blown out? Or do you get blown out and it's not sucked out? No. Right, there is no pressure outside, there is pressure on the inside. So that's blown out, isn't it? Because if it's sucked out, that means there's higher pressure in the area you're going towards. Anyway, some people get very touchy about that kind of thing.
Moon scientists, please email ufocast@yahoo.com and fill us in on this one. Yes. Because there's a whole thing, obviously, there's the air inside the balloon is being contained by the material of the balloon.
Yes, and so the balloon itself should expand because there's less air pressure in the room.
Because the air is being forced out of the window.
Yes.
By there being no air pressure outside.
Yes.
So yes, and then there's presumably some kind of fan being blown at the actors because their cheeks do that kind of ripply thing that happens when you put kind of a lot of air onto a person.
Exactly. Without wanting to be Doctor Who centric, there is a definite John Pertwee feel to that whole thing where you stick a fan in somebody's face. We've all seen it. But yeah, the fan on somebody's face, I don't even think you can get away with that with health and safety these days.
No. You can.
Yeah.
Because so if you come across a YouTuber called Tom Scott,
I haven't.
So he's quite a popular YouTuber. Brings out videos every Monday, I think it is. And he does kind of there's various strands, but one of them is sciencey stuff, and people kind of email him and say, "Come and do our cool sciencey thing." And a few years ago, he did a video where they stuck him in a wind tunnel with lots and lots of harnesses, and I can't remember. They got the wind up to, I don't know. I can't remember. I will try and find a link to it and put it in the show notes so you can have a look at this video. But basically, the same thing happens to him as happens to the actors in this episode by being blasted with a lot of air.
Oh, that makes complete sense.
So, but it's a great start to the episode, and you get this feeling because if we're following the order that we're following, last week you've got Paul Foster becomes a member of Shadow, and then this week he's commander of Moonbase. So some time has certainly passed, and you get the feeling that he's been there for a while. He's built friendships with people in Shadow, and for him, this is quite serious. This guy who he's friends with has just been killed by the aliens. So you set up the kind of emotional stakes for him at the very beginning that more than anybody on Moonbase, he wants to get this alien now because he's killed his friend.
Without question, that is it in a nutshell. I've got very little to add to that because it's actually a really well constructed segment. They don't know why it cracked at the beginning. They do assume it's an accident. Perhaps that was the whole point of it. And it's not until they rebuild all of the glass that they realise that it's an assassination attempt or murder or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I can imagine CSI Moon being called in to rebuild that, but that's fine.
Yep.
This is also I think this is the first episode where Ed Straker ends up on the moon.
Yes,
where he's a lot more hands-on. But that's when they're journeying back to the moon, isn't it? The second time when they go off to when there's an investigation called out.
Yes, and there's the whole scene where sorry, go on.
No. I'm just saying I've got some issues with procedures on Moonbase, but that's just me. I'm sure we've covered them where we've got where we apparently at the beginning were sold on an all-female crew of command, and then Paul's in charge, which is just a bit disappointing because it kind of worked for me. With it's like that's where the
again,
purple wig ladies go. Yeah.
Commander Ellis seems to have disappeared in this episode because you've still got Joan Harrington, who seems to be the senior person in the control room when Straker turns up, and you've got Nina. So those two are the ones that stick around for longer. I think we do have more episodes with Lieutenant Ellis in, but she is notably missing from this.
Yeah.
And
apparently
I guess
the episodes where, because I think she got another job and Freeman got a job as well elsewhere, which explained later on the recasting.
Right, and I mean, in terms of Freeman, with the advent of Paul Foster, we're already seeing him being pushed to the background, aren't we?
Yeah,
because he was kind of set up as the co-lead with Ed Bishop in the first episode. You've got George Sewell and Ed Bishop playing these two guys who've clearly worked together for a long time, setting up Shadow. But in this episode, Alec Freeman doesn't do much at all. He's barely in it and is reduced to kind of collecting reports and things. And you can see that the shift in tone.
There is definitely a use for Freeman in the Paul Foster stories later on.
Yes,
so
and the episode ends with the two of them together. So it clearly Straker is still the kind of aloof, computer trusting, slightly unemotional lead. And so nobody's really going to bond with him and be mates with him. So yes, there is the other relationship with Foster and Freeman that, as you say, develops as we go along. But just on this episode, he seems to have been relegated to the background as Foster becomes the kind of the younger, more traditional, dashing young male lead of the show.
Yeah, he's definitely the Commander Riker of the whole thing.
Yes, well, and his girlfriend of the week, Tina Duval.
Apparently, she died last week.
Well, so I looked her up on. I'd seen the news middle of September.
September.
We're recording this for Inside Baseball for everybody. We're recording this just after episode 3 has gone out on the feeds this morning. So you will be listening to episode 3 today. We are recording episode 5. So by the time you hear this, it will be another month down the line. But very sad news that she had passed away.
But yes, back to in-universeness. You've got so yes, she does have girlfriend of the week, which isn't a particularly good way of approaching things. They go, oh, did she have someone? Did he have someone special? Well, there was someone. She lived in Windermere House. Off you go.
Yeah.
Back to a 1970s tower block.
Yes. Do you feel that slightly spoils the facade of kind of futuristicness?
You know what? Not really, because I've always had issues with period drama. Because just bear with me, you've got stuff set in the 60s, and it's always very specifically the things we think of as the 60s. But
Yes.
we now own old furniture, antiques, stuff we've not got rid of. Obviously, we haven't got anything from the future, but we've got stuff from the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a T-shirt, just for sake of argument, I've got a Sandman 10th anniversary T-shirt, but it's 10 years old or whatever. You know what I mean? We don't wear stuff that's of that particular time. So the visiting a 1970s tower block makes just as much sense as visiting the Irish old lady's cottage, which is like from the turn of the century, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So,
that's
do you have a
good
problem
point.
with it? Or?
No. That is a very valid way of looking at it. Yes, I live in a house that is not brand new. You live in a house that's most definitely not brand new. And
sadly,
yet it is still 2017. So, yeah, I think it's perhaps one of those things where with the set, they've clearly gone all out to make sure the set fits with whatever vision of the future that they've got. But then the exterior this is the exterior that we've shot.
Yeah, but if you compare this with the exteriors of the confetti episode, the one which shows the setting up of Shadow, which is very contemporaneous with the episode being shot.
Yep.
The exterior shots there look grimy, look dirty, look real. And the exterior shots of this office block, this Windermere house, let's call it that, look clean and everything's tidy, and it looks. So in a sense, the future is nicer than the present.
The future has been tidied up.
Yes, the future's had its hedge trimmed.
Yep.
Which isn't a euphemism, thank God. Moving on.
So we've got Foster has this girlfriend back on Earth, and she is part of this subplot of what happens if you're a member of a secret organization and you have relationships. How are those affected by the fact that you're not allowed to tell them the whole truth? Because she clearly is aware. She's aware that he's not telling her the whole truth. And at the end of this episode, we learn that's, well, in the heat of the moment, it's too much for her, and he leaves, and then she potentially regrets having kind of chucked him out. But it's one of those things where you go, well, we don't see enough of the relationship to make a judgment, but there is that element of like, well, this would be quite difficult for a relationship, wouldn't it? If you had to keep what you did day to day a secret, and in the case of Foster, kind of disappear for weeks, potentially months on end, while you're on the moon.
Well, also, as far as she's concerned, she'll be buying into his cover story, which is that he works for the film studio.
Well, we don't know that. Is that what she thinks?
Well, I'm guessing because his cover story is that he's a producer working for this clearly far too complicated cover story film studio place.
Well, no, but that's Ed Straker's cover story.
Right? I know. You do see later on. Where is he? He's watching Russia's. Now I don't know if that's just what he's ran off to like do. You know, it's like oh, this is my coffee break. Where am I? Oh, I'm in a film studio. I'll kill some time by hanging around the studio. Yeah. Perhaps that's it. I don't know. Yeah. Am I giving this too much thought?
No. It's one of those things of now you because you have watched it quite a bit ahead. I'm rewatching as we go along, and it's been a few years since I've rewatched UFO. I'm
trying to do both, to be honest. I'm watching them when I want to.
Yes.
In order, because I'm enjoying it so much and I can't help myself, and I don't think I could honestly wait a year to watch them all. I mean, I'm literally enjoying it that much, and that's not a major problem for us because
of course,
I want to watch it again. I know there are some like the Blake Seven podcast. I forgot what that one's called. The one where they're doing a rewatch. There's someone who it's new to them, and they are literally watching that one episode at a time, and they're not skipping ahead. They're being very good about that. I don't have that level of self-control. No. I'm so sorry.
But so now you mention that though, you are right. I'd forgotten and we'll come to that episode when we get to it. It's that whole thing of we talked before about the fact that obviously Ed Straker goes down in the lift, and Freeman goes down in the lift, and Foster goes down in the lift, but it would be very weird if all the Shadow personnel got into the base that way, because they'd all be going through the office and not coming out again. So that there is that question of like, well, to what extent are the personnel of Shadow doubling as film people? And like you say, Straker definitely is, and it seems that Foster now is as well. Though not on the evidence of this episode. So purely on the evidence of this episode...
Definitely not. He's just vanishing off.
We don't know what he's told her.
Yeah.
We don't know what his cover story is for her. It's conceivable that he's just said, well, I work for the military. It's even better. I've worked out even better cover story for him. He sticks with what he was already doing. I'm a test pilot. I'm a test pilot.
Travel all over the world.
Yep.
There you go. That's because you can already prove that.
Yep. That's
so,
a very plausible.
That's if it was me, the best way for him to lie would just be to tell a version of the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what are you doing all the time? I'm a test pilot. Oh yes, you are. Okay then.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's curious.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got that. Oh, hang on. There is something that neither of us have dealt with, and I know we talked about this a few episodes ago, but the race card again.
Yes. And in fact, I think we had some feedback on that episode saying that we'd majored on that aspect of computer affair over and above other things. But we have to talk about it again here. And you alluded to it at the time, because Foster having become Moonbase commander, is presumed dead.
Yeah.
And Mark Bradley is, as he refers to himself, the senior man, so he's the next obvious choice, and Straker offers him the job. And what happens?
And he says, no, I'm not going to take it. Why? Because of this, motions towards his skin. And it's like, oh, that racism burned itself out 5 years ago, implying again that it's 1985 or 1980 or whatever, you want to call it.
Yeah.
But that's fine. There you go. It's basically, here's our universe storyline done. And but then the next scene is Mark taking control.
Yeah.
He actually does take the big seat. Yeah.
Because I can't remember the dialogue exactly.
Oh, isn't it? I don't care if you're polka dot as long as you're good at the job.
Yes, it's like, I don't care if you're polka dot with or whatever. But it's that the implication from Mark was that because Straker is white, he doesn't fully comprehend the situation.
Well, in all fairness, it's not just that he's white. And I don't use this word very often because it doesn't come up. Aryan. Because in the series, he's blonde, he's calculating, he's cold. You could, if you were casting Aryans, I know he's dyed his hair, but if you want to go down that road, he is.
So Mark implies that although on the surface racism has gone in this fictional 1981, he's like, it's still there deep down, and it may show up. If I'm the commander, I might order a guy out on a mission and he won't obey my orders because I'm black, is the implication. And the implication is that Straker is being extremely naive in thinking that racial prejudice has gone. And Straker's response is basically to say, I don't care what colour your skin is, you're the right man for the job.
Well, that makes, that is it. So I know we went on about it last time, but this is a continuation of the same thing. It would be, obviously, this is the 2017 hindsight looking back, it would be better if there were more black or lots and lots of different countries and origins represented here in the show, but you can't have everything.
No, you can't. You can't. And there's a certain element of obviously Straker is American, but there is a certain element of like everybody else is British, and you would expect a more international representation on that level.
Well, yeah, because it's meant to be
regardless of skin color. Yeah,
it's meant to be It's meant to be basically the UN sanctioned space thing.
Yes.
So yeah, right. So we haven't discussed the alien himself, the man in red.
Yes.
With the green face. Now, can I just ask? Right, every time I put an episode on, the program opens with the very first scene of it's the 70s, so we're going to go with body horror, of somebody having the plastic eye thing removed.
Yes.
And every single time they've used the same shot, and the alien lying down flinches.
Yeah.
Ever so slightly, but he's meant to be dead.
No, he's not.
He's not dead.
No, because that shot.
That's from episode 1, isn't it?
That's from episode 1, where the alien is still alive initially,
right?
And they're trying to find stuff out, and then he dies.
Right, that's fine. I can completely.
So,
I'll forgive it now. It's just you almost wanted to make them do it again.
Yes, no, you can remove that from plot holes. It's not. The context of that was an alien who was unconscious. Right,
we've got the bit that both of us remembered, which was the enemy mine, Romulan and the Geordie. Enemy of my enemy. Let's all survive, and then we can fight about it later. Scenes, which are the bits that stay with us.
Yes.
Obviously, it goes without saying the stuff on the moon, the people going out there, the moonscapes. I think at one point there's a rock does wobble in the background, but we'll let that go. Because let's face it, on the wobbly sets front, this is not. That's an aberration on this show, by far. And regardless of whether it's an aberration on other shows, we can have that discussion another time. We've got. But here, you don't see that kind of thing. Everything's very sturdy, heavy, hefty, and yes, I've got issues with with Straker waiting till the last minute to call out the strike force to shoot the UFO craft rather than just send them up so they could hang around just in case. It's as if when the UFO is attacking the ground crew, who've been sent out in the Captain Scarlet style moon buggies, bouncer things. He then calls them out. It's like, well, wouldn't you have sent them up earlier? And they always do that scramble thing where they have to go down the chutes, which is left over from Thunderbirds and things like that. It seems overly complex, and it seems too much not forward thinking. But that's just, and thus padding. But that's beside the point. I just wish he'd thought about it and sent some people in beforehand. But then Paul's left on the moon with his 1,000,000 to 1 chance of survival, and then he gets together with his little green friend, and they walk across the surface. Now, the thing that I did like about this storyline is the reason that they can't rescue Paul is because his radio doesn't work. So it's the exact opposite of what's it? Thingy's revolver. What's it called? Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, right. Because what they do is they go, here's why we can't rescue him. His radio's not working. And you go, right, they can't rescue him. His radio's not working. It's done. So it's as if the gun's been used and then put back on the mantelpiece, and then you ignore it, thinking it's not going to be used again. But the reason he can't save the alien at the end is the same reason. Is his radio's not working.
His radio doesn't work. Yeah.
So that's a beautiful piece of structure for me.
Yeah.
But of course, I could be very wrong.
Yes.
Now, because that's brilliant, I can now say a bad thing, which is the scene where they cross the precipice of no actual perception. Because you don't know at all how deep it is. The camera points down, and it could be pointing at a big pile of plaster of Paris. It could be anything. You've no idea how deep this crevasse is.
Yeah.
They imply it's deep because they dangle the camera a bit. But when you first see it, you go, yeah. And also, you're on the moon. Can you jump it?
Yes. Well, and I think this is one of those scenes that really shows up the limitations of pre-CGI science fiction. Because if you were making that scene today, you would. I mean, a lot of it would be on green screen, but you would be able to have an establishing wide shot where you would put your green screen actors, you would situate them into your wide shot, and you would have that. Oh right, here is our perspective. But they clearly don't have enough moon set, or the height in the studio or whatever. They don't have the time or the money or whatever. Or because they could have done a glass shot. There are any number of ways that they could have done that.
Or even just tiny little models.
Or models.
Someone with a yellow helmet and a red helmet looking down.
Because we do get the shot. We do get the model shot where the camera pans across and there's a model of Foster lying on the moon surface, and then it cuts to a close-up of him in the studio. So we have that. So for whatever reason, there is not the time, the money, whatever, to do the wide shot to make that scene work. And you're right, it's one of those things where you go, well, here's a close-up of this side of the crevasse, here's a close-up of this side of the crevasse, here's the dangly shot of what Foster is seeing as he comes across. But there's no wide establisher to situate us and to really sell the peril of the situation. And it feels like one of those, like you say, padding scenes. It's like, here's some extra peril. We've got some more minutes for them to fill. We have to have some more stuff for them to do on the moon. What's the challenging thing that we can do with... And we haven't mentioned this yet.
No, fair enough.
Foster has done his leg in. So...
Oh, of course, yes. Foster's done his leg in and he's running out of air. Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, so he's running out of air. He's done his leg in, and he's totally dependent on his alien friend to get him through the situation, which, given that Foster is pretty annoyed at said alien for killing his friend, he's in this position of dependence. It's quite a difficult place for him to be in. And yet, having been through this experience, at the very end of the episode, he's absolutely gutted that his rescuers kill the guy off.
And to be fair, though, he'd be gutted from a purely military point of view as well, because this is an alien who's willing to help. So,
yes.
Because everybody else that they've communicated with has screamed, aged, died, disintegrated, or done all that kind of nonsense. But here's an alien who actually just kind of is a bit helpful and provided him with a rebreather ball thing and some extra toothpaste glue and things like that.
Yeah.
While they're outside, and that's fine. All fine until the passing rescue ship just happens to wander by. That's not a problem. So just from a military point of view, from an interrogation point of view, from actually finding out what's going on, he'd be an ideal person to have around.
Yes.
Because he might tell you.
He might, but it's one of these things of... So we only see this one alien in this episode. It's the actor, it's Gito Santana, I think his name is, who plays the bog standard alien in most of the episodes so far. We've seen episodes with 2 aliens in. There must be another alien because who's piloting the UFO when it crashes?
And firing at them.
Yes. Unless miraculously it's him and he somehow survives that crash. But we're assuming that he's still on the surface for whatever reason. His mate takes off in the UFO and it crashes.
Yeah.
Earlier in the episode, we've seen him come up to Moonbase and shoot the window. So he's clearly there with malevolent intent. And so, again, it's one of these things of like, it's the circumstances that have forced his cooperating with Foster upon... That's what's happened, isn't it? Because if we try and look at it from his point of view, he's stranded out here on the moon. His UFO is gone. He's got no way of communicating with his fellow aliens. He stumbles across another dude on the moon and presumably reasons that the best way for him to survive is to help this guy back to the base. He'll put in a good word for him, and then he'll be able to presumably enter into some kind of prisoner of war situation.
Well, like some sort of exchange on a bridge kind of thing. Yeah,
and possibly if he gives them some information, then they'll let him live. I don't know. It's quite a bleak situation for him at this point.
No, you know what? I'd not given it that much thought. You are completely right. I'd not seen it from the alien's point of view at all. I assumed he was trying to get somewhere to get rescued, but that makes just as much sense because he's got no radio.
Well, I mean, actually, we don't know, actually, because we don't know what...
we don't know because you don't...
What the equipment that the aliens have on their suits does. It's possible that he's been able to radio for help, and like you say, he's... Well, and so here we go. Ordnance survey maps of the moon.
No, you know what? I've got absolutely no issue with that at all, because physical paper maps work. They don't break. They're not going to run out of batteries. That's just clever. That just makes sense.
I agree. It was just one of those things of going, oh, actually, if they made this today, almost certainly the map would be some iPad device that he had, or he'd have his kind of GPS or the equivalent of moon GPS. So GPS, Global Positioning System. So what would it be? MPS, Moon Positioning System, or something like that. Or Lunar, LPS, Lunar Positioning System. He'd have that to tell him where he was. Or I suppose, or you could make it that got damaged in the crash, and so he suddenly has to kind of go back to old-fashioned methods. Whereas in this version of events, they just assume that he'll be using a paper map, because that's all the writers can imagine at this point.
But in all fairness, this is the 1980s when you would have had a paper map.
Yes,
so that's
exactly.
So,
but it's another of those things where watching it now, particularly if you introduce this to someone, a child of our age, they would immediately notice this and think it was odd. And in fact, I was in the post office yesterday and I was queuing up and I just noticed the A to Z of the local area on the shelf, and I thought, okay, there's still a market for those because they're selling them. But I can't remember the last time I used an A to Z. That's all
completely
Google Maps.
Right. I took a drive to the south coast a few months ago, and that's a good 6-hour drive from here to the south of England. And when you're in the UK, a 6-hour drive is quite a substantial feat, especially when you've got a kid in the car.
Yeah.
And the first thing me and my wife did was I pulled over at the services and I went into the shop and I bought a brand new, up-to-date map of the UK, because although we've both got really good sat-navs in our car, it's not... and I think mine updates with roadworks and things like that. I just didn't trust it, and luckily there was an 8-hour delay on the motorway coming home. It had been announced first thing in the morning, and we thought, oh yeah, it'll clear up. But then as we left, I checked the radio and it was still on. So we took a diversion past what's it called? The place where King Arthur's buried. There's a tour,
Glastonbury.
Lost me. So we ended up driving past Glastonbury. Trust me, if you visit Glastonbury, you can go and visit where King Arthur's buried. You can. There's a little cross in the cathedral, the abbey. You will do that another time. But anyway, we ended up driving via there instead, using just the maps. And the sat-nav was shouting at us constantly for a good hour and a half, going, "You're going the wrong way." And we were both shouting, "No, we're not. We're avoiding an 8-hour motorway thing." So yeah, paper maps are a lovely default, perhaps for just people of my generation. But yeah, having A to Z is always a nice thing to fall back on. So when technology fails, paper doesn't let you down.
No.
I am such a traditionalist.
No, but I think it's a very good point, and particularly in a situation on the moon where resources are limited, it actually makes sense that he has a paper map to fall back on.
This is the one time where I'm against, because normally when it comes to the moon base, I'm always thinking, oh, they've printed out all of that stuff on the moon. They had to take it back with them. All their reports are printed on paper. But now it's like, no, they do need paper on the moon for this. This is fine. I can live with that. So yeah. The conflict, I guess, yes, and it's a bit of battle, and it is a complete shame, and Paul's very upset and things like that. So that's fine. But like I said, it was the broken radio thing going, oh yeah, that's how we can't communicate. And I was thinking, oh yeah, touch helmets so that the vibration goes through. Oh, have you ever done one of those? I'm sorry, for any listeners out there who are sick of me going off on a tangent, imagine living with me. Right. Right. Have you ever done one of those things where you go for a job interview, or they give you the NASA test where they say, right, you're stranded on the moon and you've got this list of equipment, what's most useful? Have you ever done that one? Right.
I've had very few job interviews in my life.
But have you ever done those? No. They're like a part of IQ tests and things like that. Basically, it's an A4 piece of paper. It's quite famous, and they give you them, and it's got a list of equipment that you've got. And you have to put it in order of importance. On some of them, one of the job interviews I went for, I can't believe this. They said, right, you're stranded on a desert. This was to see how well you worked as a team. Right, you're stranded. Your aeroplane's gone down. Here's the equipment that's on the plane. Do you stay with the plane? Do you walk through the Amazon jungle? Do you do this and this? How do you work together and things like that? So we had to spend half an hour having that discussion. So it's that kind of test. Anyway, the one we had when I was at high school that they gave us because it was basically raining and it was a playtime, was about how you would survive on the moon. And one of the things in your survival pack was a revolver. And I reasoned at the time was that you can't, to fire a gun requires oxygen because it's an ignition system, because it's a chemical reaction with a hammer. And the hammer hits the case and ignites the gunpowder. It's the ignition that causes the fire, which causes then to launch the projectile. Right? Now,
yes.
We were imagining there were no aliens involved, which makes things more complicated, right? Basically, you've landed on the moon. It's a survival situation. Why do you need the gun in the first place? Why have they bothered taking one? You're not allowed to take weapons into space. That's the point. I'm sure there's an international treaty on that one in reality, but leave it there.
Yep.
Because obviously nobody's got massive spaceborne lasers at all in reality. Anyway, they said their argument was that the gun could be used if you fire it at the surface. It would act you as a propulsion and it would launch you into the air and eventually you'd come down, so you could actually use it to travel large distances.
But you're saying that it wouldn't work because
my argument was that
oxygen.
It wouldn't work because it needs oxygen. Can you fire a gun in space? Now, obviously in this episode of UFO, bringing that here, you've got weapons that have clearly been tested by Shadow and by the aliens to work in space. So whether they're ordinary traditional guns or not is kind of it doesn't matter, because the alien says he's removed what looks like bullets from the gun for his gun when he hands the weapon over. So that's fine. I can live with that because they're alien space weapons, and Shadow's clearly got some. It could be a magnetic system where it has a series of electromagnets where you pull the trigger and the projectile gets flung out at high velocity without actually needing an explosion like a traditional. I've given this far too much thought.
You have, and actually, in terms of the sound design, the noise that the guns make because we hear one fired at the beginning and we hear one fired at the end. The noise that the guns make doesn't sound like a gun would sound on Earth, does it? They've clearly made some effort to make it sound a bit like it's being propelled by air, maybe, rather than
that makes sense.
But that's equally problematic because is it like a paintball?
Yes,
essentially.
That's what it looks like.
Is there a canister of air somehow concealed?
Well, that is
in
exactly
the
what the alien looks like he's handing over. Looks like he's got in his hand. It looks like he's got the canisters that would provide the propulsion for the weapon, and it would allow you to hear them because there'd be some air in the air. But that's let's not go down that road. None of these things should be making noises in space thing, because that always makes me sad. Because if they don't have the noises, they just look like models. We've covered this before. That's one of the reasons something rumbles past in Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, if you stick to the truth of physics, then the episode loses its drama because you can't hear anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I can live with that. But there's always a considerably more logic applied when it comes in Jerry Anderson dramas, especially. There's a lot more logic applied to what's happening on TV than there are in some other stuff. And I'm sorry to bring this back to Doctor Who, but there's a whole hand wavium thing where it's like, oh yes, I'll explain later, goes on.
Yeah.
There's not as much of that goes on here at all.
No. There's always an effort to kind of make it work.
Yeah. Which makes it, again, a lot more Torchwoody than Doctor Who, but that's beside the point. Oh, sorry, I've just remembered the story Moonbase, Doctor Who, where there is something blown out into space and a crack in the window, the day is saved by a tin tray being put against the window. And in this episode, I was expecting the chair, which moves across the room, admittedly it's an inflatable chair, something to hit the window and block it, and thus save the person. But clearly that doesn't happen.
But no.
So we have dealt with that kind of thing. So is there anything we've not covered?
Well, I think we have to talk about the ending of the episode. Because it feels unresolved because you get the scene of Foster trying to communicate that there's an alien who is my friend, and the only thing that they hear is it's an alien, and they shoot the alien, and Foster is like, yeah. And then we're back on Earth. He goes to see Tina. Tina's like, I can't cope with your secret life. Foster leaves, gets in the car with Alec, drives off. Alec drives off, and he's like, should we go for a pint?
Which is, of course, the way you solve all emotional problems.
You're like, what? There must have been some kind of debrief scene with Straker, who would have given the guys a dressing down, going, why didn't you try and capture the alien? There would have been Foster
that's the bit that I would have had an issue with, the why didn't you capture the alien thing.
Yeah.
Because I think, because let's face it, that's all Straker really wants, is an alien he can chat with.
Yes. Yeah, he wants to have some kind of breakthrough in this war. Well, I suppose it is a war for him, isn't it? It's like the aliens are threatening the Earth, and any advantage he can get, and part of that involves, well, in this case, they were trying to capture the UFO, weren't they? It was like, can we get our hands on a UFO? That's why Straker goes to the moon in the first place, because he's like, well, every time we've got one before, it's been on Earth, they deteriorate in Earth's atmosphere. Fantastic, there's one on the moon, let's capture it on the moon. And equally, once he'd found out an alien was alive and had then been shot, he would have been a bit annoyed that an effort hadn't been made. So there's that aspect of it, which you kind of feel isn't resolved. And then there's the emotional aspect for Foster, who he just seems entirely unaffected by the end. At the end, he gets in the car, let's go for a pint. And I suppose you could argue that is him, that this is just how he deals with it. Yeah. He's had this traumatic experience on the moon where he thought he was going to die. His girlfriend's been told that he's dead. He comes back into her life. She can't cope with it. What do we do now? I've got to go and get drunk. That could be the way you interpret it. But it just ended, and I was profoundly dissatisfied with how it ended, because I wanted something more to wrap it all up, and I didn't feel that I was given that.
No, it's all incredibly valid points, because you don't get that. But do you need it? Because basically we've just gone, what I didn't get is, which means it's already in your head, which means does it need to be in front of you? I suppose it does, because it needs to be dealt with. But it's not the only UFO episode that doesn't have a good ending, or a one that leaves you with a feeling of closure.
No, I that's right, but I think there are ways of leaving an episode open-ended. I mean, like the very first episode, there's a closure of sorts, but a very much a kind of, now we've set up the series kind of thing. There's a question of priorities. I'm not going to say anything more about that for those who haven't watched it yet, but that episode ends in a really dark place for Straker, but you kind of feel that we've landed at a point, and life goes on. You know that life goes on, and life is going to be tough, but it's landed. Whereas this felt that it had come to a point, and then I wanted it to kind of go on a little bit further. I wanted maybe a scene in the pub with Foster kind of pouring out his emotions. I mean, maybe it's just a comment on the fact that men are rubbish at talking about our emotions.
Yes,
that's a huge blanket statement. Maybe, but I will own it for myself and just say that I know that I have not been given the emotional vocabulary to deal with some of the things that I feel in the same way that I feel that my wife has. And there was a program. I also think that,
and we can discuss this another time, but I do think that has a lot more to do with our processing systems, where we have the thought, and then basically we retro-engineer our emotions to fit with the thought we've had, so that if someone says, how do you feel about this? You're actually just putting the emotions on afterwards to the thought you've already had. If that makes any sense. I've given this a lot of thought as well.
That's deep. It just reminded me of, I don't know if you saw, there was a BBC programme a couple of months ago. I think it was something like Can Our Kids Go Gender Free? And it was this psychologist.
Yes, I did watch that a lot.
Exploring how the school environment in particular kind of forms boys and girls. And there was this fascinating thing where they kind of scored them on emotional vocabulary. Yes. At the beginning of the experiment, and the only emotion that the boys scored highly on in terms of being able to kind of talk about and have other words for was anger.
And tension.
Yeah, and the girls had this was kind of 7-year-olds, and the girls already had a lot more emotional vocabulary for talking about their emotions, of all stripes, and it was interesting to see that played out in as the episode went on, and some of these boys, one in particular who really struggled when he couldn't do a particular thing, he just got angry because it was the only emotional response he could articulate. And this is probably projecting so much onto this episode, but I wonder whether that's partly what's going on, in that Foster has been through this traumatic experience, but because he's a guy living in a particular society at a particular time, he doesn't have the tools with which to process it and talk about it, and whoever has written the episode is similarly minded, and so doesn't know how to do that either. That's just my theory.
No, the thing is, right, it's one of those things. Oh, there's very important things are the things we don't think about, the things that we don't notice, that we just sort of let go, that we let pass because we just think that's how things are. So if you didn't question that, then that's more of an issue, because you go, oh yeah, that's just how things are. So that's what you do. You get, like Ford Prefect says in Hitchhiker's Guide, well, what we normally do is we just go and get very drunk later and think about them then. It's along those lines. And because, now that if you are willing to think about those things now, that's a major step forward. Yeah. But yeah, I did watch the Same Gender program. It was deeply interesting. There were a few issues, but yeah, the Here Comes Trouble t-shirts that young boys are given constantly, and you very, very rarely see them on a girl. If you stick a label on a kid, the kid will read the label and go, yeah, that's me, and reinforce it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. And I see it all the time. My kid is 8, and we're well aware of that. I mean, oh God, I am such a middle-class parent, but I am the person who complained to Smith's Toys and said, why are Lego elves in the girls' toys and Lego everything else is in the boys' toys when you could just have a Lego aisle? You know, it's it's because how many and I was talking to other kids at my daughter's drama group, other parents, and they were saying that their sons are really into Lego elves because there's dragons and that kind of thing, and that's just a tiny subtle differentiation. Yeah. For a start, it's costing Lego money, but I think they can afford it. But it's the tiny little things like that just keep reinforcing things and don't make things better. Yeah.
And I had a recent experience. My daughter is 5 months old next week, and I had an experience recently. I went into mother care, and it was children's clothes from 6 months to 6 years old or something like that. And there was a girls section and a boys section, and in the boys section there was a T-shirt that said "Science Rocks."
Yeah.
And it was blue, unsurprisingly. And I went over to the girls' aisle. I was like, well, I just want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I want to see, do they have a Science Rocks T-shirt in pink? Yeah. Because it would be in pink, wouldn't it, in the girls' aisle? But no. So I tweeted at them with a picture. I had no response from Mother Care. But and so
if you don't fix it when they're little, it's harder to fix when they're old.
And I think this to bring it properly back to UFO. Yeah, this is why what you no, but it's important. This is why what you were saying before about the fact that we had this all-female crew in command of Moonbase. Yes, we had the men being pilots, but prior to this episode, it was kind of established that the women were running Moonbase, and it was a case of, well, here are some role models that you can hold up. You've got so we've got people on the moon. So this is to do with science. You've got women in command. Here's some role models that you've kind of set up for people watching this. And so it does feel like a step back to have Foster in command of that setup.
But Foster's character is meant to be the strong, silent type because he's fitting into that. And God forgive me for using this phrase, trope. I'm sorry, I so avoid using those. But yeah, it's a type, it's a character, it's a stereotype thing. That's what it is. The strong, silent type it's shorthand. It's what people can relate to. It's just, that's your characterization. There you go. Off you go. Done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can see why they've done it. I can see that they have done it. And you know what? There'll be a lot of people listening to this going, yeah, I see everybody's point, but can we just talk about how cool the spaceships were? So,
yeah. So let's. Okay, so before we do our usual actor thing,
yes,
which will round out the show, you've already mentioned it, but let's talk about the battle, because that was really well done. Because we've seen maybe one or two laser blasts from the UFO before, but this was an all-out assault.
There's ground crew.
On the model. You've got the guys on the set. You've got the model shots. You've got laser beams flying everywhere. You've got UFO taking off, being shot down. Bang! It lands on a moon bubble, and that whole sequence was really, really dynamic and really, really well done.
Yeah,
I thought
it's seamless. It's truly seamless. I know it's easier to do that sort of thing on a black background in space on the moon and things like that, but it's a major feat to be able to produce something that smooth.
And you still have to light your models and your live action sets so that they look the same. And I think that's something that really, really works on this. So yeah, let's to put all that other stuff aside. The spaceships were cool. The action was cool. The explosions were cool. Derek Meddings had a lot of fun with this one. And,
without question.
There's another episode of UFO.
It certainly is. And you know what? It's found its voice. It's found its stride. You know what to expect. You know it's darker than the other Anderson stuff, but you're still watching it and you're still enjoying it. And I've got no problem at all with it. I genuinely thought this was a decent story. But like we said, the emotional survival on the moon bit is the bit that stays with you. And it isn't until you watch it again that you realise it's got so much more to it than that.
Yeah. So, if you're not a fan of Doctor Who Watch, and some of you have already told us that you're not a fan of Doctor Who Watch and Prisoner Watch, that's the UFO chat out of the way. But we are going to go into Doctor Who Watch for this week before we wrap up. So, Michael, who did you spot from Doctor Who in this episode?
To be fair, none of the main characters. There's because you've got the main shadow people. It's almost a bottle episode because you've got the same people. Unless Paul's girlfriend was in Doctor Who and I've just never seen her before. You've got the ordinary cast who we've already discussed. So
yes, I think she was in an episode of Blake 7, but that's and also an episode of Danger Man. That's as close as she comes to Doctor Who or The Prisoner. But no, so and you're right. The main cast, we don't have any Doctor Who actors, but we do have two. The rescuer guys at the end who come and find Paul Foster. Both of them have roles in Doctor Who. So let's dive in. The first one, Ray Armstrong, who played Grey in Ambassadors of Death, and I had to look him up in my Universal Databank by Jean-Marc Lefisier.
Yes.
Because I was like, okay, he plays this chap called Grey in episodes 1 and 2 of the Ambassadors of Death. I have no idea who that is. Apparently he's one of General Carrington's men in the Ambassadors of Death. So that's rescuer number 1. Did you spot him?
I didn't, to be fair.
Well, no, I didn't either.
I am now thinking, I wonder where my copy of Universal Index is.
Mine is sitting up there on the shelf next to my program guide and my terrestrial index. So there we go.
I'm pretty sure that my discontinuity guide. Yes, it is. It's second. I'm sorry. I'm picturing it now in the dining room. It's the third shelf down, right hand side. It's not a problem. Sorry, I spent 11 years working in the book trade. I have this incredible knack of being able to picture where books are. Just rather, it's a bit spooky, to be honest. Anyway, right. Moving on, please. Moving on. Move on.
So the other rescuer was an actor called David Weston. Now, do you recognise the name David Weston, Michael?
I can honestly say I don't.
You don't? Well, so he has 2 roles in Doctor Who. Back in William Hartnell's day, he played Nicholas Muss in The Massacre. A sadly missing Doctor Who story. No episodes.
Does he exist as a drawing?
Well, they haven't animated
no, it's not
that
The Massacre.
One, have
they? It's the other one. Sorry, I was thinking of the other French one. Yeah.
You were thinking of The Reign of Terror. Yes.
I was thinking of The Reign of Terror.
So I suspect there are pictures of him.
Yes.
Because there are pictures from The Massacre, but his performance only exists on audio now because
Right.
all Doctor Who was preserved audio-wise. And his second role
Was there a
as
loose
Birok,
cannon reproduction of that?
Almost certainly, yes.
I think I have, because I have all of them, so I shall dig it out.
Right. And you can see if you can spot him. I mean, this is the other thing: is they're wearing helmets, aren't they? So, no, do we see them inside the moon mobile? I'd have to go
Yes,
back
we
and
do,
look.
but they are wearing helmets as well.
We see
Yes,
that we see them without their helmets on. Anyway,
yes.
the
have
other
a very
one,
exciting chat about about avoiding a crevasse and going to the right. Yes,
going to the right. Yes, they do. Right. So the other role that David Weston plays in Doctor Who was Birok in Warrior's Gate.
I do like Warrior's Gate.
Who is a time-sensitive lion type?
A Tharil.
A Tharil, yes. And as I came to Doctor Who via the books, the Target novelizations mostly, I thought his name was Byrock.
Yes.
Because that's how I read it. And then when I watched the episode, it turns out no, it's Birok.
To be fair, if you'd actually said Byrock not for exactly the same reason, but for a reason of I didn't have the VHS for years because it took ages to come out, but I did have all of the Target books for my entire childhood. Yeah. I would have agreed with you completely, and I would have gone,
Byrock.
Yeah. So you're not alone on that one.
Yes. So yeah, that's our Doctor Who watch for the week.
No one from The Prisoner?
No one from The Prisoner, unfortunately. No, no other Anderson alumni apart from the ones we already know. Ed Straker in every episode played Captain Blue. He will always be an Anderson character from another show. But that is Survival. That is episode 5. Next time we are going to do episode 6, which in this order is, Michael?
It is Conflict.
Conflict.
An episode that has very little actual conflict.
That's the one about space junk, right?
It is, yes. Yes, it's the one about tidying up in space.
Tidying up in space.
And who's going to pay for it?
Who's going to pay for it, and why it's bad for Shadow if there is lots of space junk.
Indeed. So let's not use up all of my notes, and let's begin by saying we'll be doing that next time. So thank you very much for listening, if you still are.
Yes, and be seeing you.
Be seeing you.
You have been listening to the UFOcast with me, Luke, from Tmudwup.
And me, Michael, from the Tin Dog Podcast.
Please get in touch with the show, let us know what you think and any feedback you might have at ufocast@yahoo.com.
Or on Twitter at UFO_cast, available on Stitcher and iTunes.